So welcome everybody back. So we Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, the abridged code of Jewish law, chapter 90, and we're up to number 10 to Yud. So we discussing things that we can't do on Shabbos, not because they are malacha, they're not one of the 39 creative activities that we used to build the Mishkan. They're not even a protection around the malacha, but they're not in the spirit of Shabbos. It's not the Shabbos flavor, for lack of a better term. So number 10, Shtari Hedyotis. So contracts, we'll loosely call it, or documents. The Haino is giving examples. So chayvus, you've got there's promissory notes, the cheshbonos, or your accounts, vigro shel shalom, or just letters sent to each other, some correspondence, but it's not to do with Shabbos. It's just regular. They're writing to you about whatever they're doing. Like what's happening in Panama, they're writing to you about, something like that. Right? So Asa Afila Ayin Behem B'li Kriya. Now we can't read them on Shabbos, we can't look into them, even without reading it aloud. Now, if you recall, we mentioned last week that there are certain things that, although you can't discuss them on Shabbos, you're allowed to think about it, as long as you don't think about it too much. So to look at your promissory notes or contracts, even though reading a contract is not technically breaking Shabbos, but obviously it's not in the spirit of Shabbos, so we can't read it even if we're only thinking as we're reading. We're not reading aloud. Even though you're only thinking. Nevertheless, you're not allowed to read them. Now, when we said before that you can think about things, right? Now, this is only when it's not recognizable, it's not obvious to everybody that you're thinking about something you shouldn't be. Well, for example, let's say a person's thinking about, say he's going on a trip on Sunday. And so he's sitting on the couch having a cup of tea, and he thinks about it for a little bit, say 10 minutes. Now, no one knows what he's thinking about. He could have been thinking about anything. The fact that he's thinking about traveling after Shabbos. So we said, as long as you don't spend too much time, as long as it's only a very small part of Shabbos and doesn't become the main part of Shabbos. So as long as you're only spending a small amount of time, then it's not recognizable that you're thinking about an activity you can't do on Shabbos, so it's not a problem. So that's when you're allowed to think about it. But if you're avulkan, but here, if you're sitting there going through promissory notes or your shop's books or various things, then it's obvious to everyone, to anyone that sees you, that you're thinking about things you can't do on Shabbos. Susan, yeah.
You're not allowed to criticize somebody on Shabbos, are you?
Well, when it comes to criticism, Shabbos and any other day don't make a difference. So depends what you mean. In other words,
I can say to my brother, you're not acting in the proper way. You're doing business on Shabbos.
So there's a lot of factors. Without getting too sidetracked off the topic, we'll just mention a few things because number one is that you can really only say something to someone if they're going to listen. In other words, if they're not going to listen, then you've made it worse for them by telling them. So, just as there is a mitzvah to rebuke someone or
right,
if they're going to listen, There's also a mitzvah if they're not going to listen, not to tell them anything.
Okay.
It's a
Okay.
famous story again. Without, it's not a story class, but just to illustrate the point. There's a story. It's told about a few people, Rabbi Levi Sobaditchev or the Abderov but whoever it was, one of these rabbis. One evening, he says to his gabbai, his attendant, he says, get my coat, we're going. And the gabbai, the attendant, was quite confused because he normally is the one who makes the appointments. And there's no appointment tonight. But nevertheless, his rabbi said, let's go. So he gets off, they start going. And they go through the streets and they come to this mansion. The rabbi knocks on the door and was a Jewish man lived there. By no means a chassid of this fellow, but, a wealthy bank manager. And he sees he has important guests. He invites them in, offers them some refreshments. And he figures if they've come to his house, they obviously have something to say. So he sits and waits patiently. And the rabbi just sits there sort of sipping the tea and not saying anything. So the fellow looks at the gabbai, the secretary / attendant, asks him what's going on. He shrugs his shoulders. He doesn't know what's going on either. And after about 20 minutes, the rabbi says, thank you very much. Wonderful hospitality. Have a nice evening. And he gets up to go. And the fellow, he's totally confused. He says, surely if the rabbi came, there must have been an important reason. And the rabbi says, yes, there was. So he asks, could the rabbi tell me the reason? He says, no, I can't. So he asks, well, why not? He says, because just as there is a mitzvah to rebuke someone if they're going to listen, there's a mitzvah not to rebuke them if they're not going to listen. And you're about to do something and you're not going to listen. So I came here to do the mitzvah of not rebuking you. So the fellow says, oh, what is it? What am I going to do wrong? He says, I can't tell you. I'm going to lose my mitzvah. He says, please tell me. He says, I can't tell you. Finally, he says, if you tell me, I promise you, I'll do the right thing. I won't, your rebuke won't go to waste. Okay, so he tells him, he says, this widow, the husband passed away, she has small children, they've defaulted on their mortgage, and your bank is going to evict them to the street. So the manager says, well, look, I'm not the owner of the bank. I'm a manager, but I just worked at it. Says, see, I told you weren't going to listen. No, I've lost my mitzvah. Anyway, cut a long story short, the bank manager paid out the mortgage himself from his own money, and everyone lived happily ever after. So the first point is that you can only tell someone who's going to listen. If they're not going to listen, you're making it worse for them. Second of all, there's a saying in Yiddish which does not translate well in English, but in Yiddish, it essentially says, if you're going to poke someone, trim your fingernail first. Okay? It's got a really nice ring to it, but in English doesn't go. But anyway, the point is that when you do have to tell someone, there's a time and a place and a way. And it doesn't have to be aggressive or nasty. You can trim the fingernail so it doesn't hurt too much. So if you are going to tell someone off, tact. That's the and in that respect, there's not a difference between Shabbos and not Shabbos. Whenever there's an appropriate time, and so that's the idea. So since this person is back to the halacha in the middle of number 10, chapter 19. So we were saying that when we said you're allowed to think about something on Shabbos, about when you think about something you can't do on Shabbos, that's if it's not recognizable. So for an example, you're thinking about going shopping after Shabbos. You think for a few minutes, so no one knows what you're thinking about. It's not recognizable. But if you're reading, you're going through promissory notes or contracts or the books of your business, then it's obvious to everyone that you're thinking about something that can't be done on Shabbos. And this is part of the prohibition of doing your business. In other words, it's your wants that are not Shabbos, not in the spirit of Shabbos. Now let's say we're not. You have a letter got sent to you, and you don't know what's in it. Now today, people aren't really eagerly waiting for the mail. We have telephones and emails and WhatsApp and all these various things. We can have a Zoom share with people all around the country, all learning together. But once upon a time, you moved to another place, sometimes even in the same country. For sure, if you went to a different country, you never saw your family again. That was how it was. And often news is not good news. When a letter arrives, it's not good news. Sometimes even any unexpected contact. As an example, my mother, she since passed away, but wanted to make a special surprise birthday for her once, and my sister and I called a few people, and I called one of her childhood friends to invite her to come. We can make a surprise. And the husband answered and said, "Who is it?" And I said, "I'm Rhonda Winnick's son." She almost had a heart attack. She thought I was calling, God forbid, for bad news, not to invite her to a birthday party. But anyway, so sometimes any news can be stressful. So this person gets this letter. He doesn't know what the letter's about. Maybe there's something in it that he needs, literally for his body, but in other words, it's a pressing need. Maybe it could be about a family member. It could be something urgent, that affects him. And so what's going to happen? His Shabbos is going to get ruined because all the what ifs are going to run in his mind the entire Shabbos, and he's going to panic. So then he's allowed to read it. But he can't read it aloud. He should only do the thinking. He should read it in thought and not read it aloud, because that's the lesser of two evils. Similar concept, similar idea. We're not allowed to fast on Shabbos. One of the exceptions, there's a few exceptions, but generally we don't fast. Like even if Tisha B'Av falls out on Shabbos, we postpone it to Sunday. Hey, the fast of Yom Kippur, overall Shabbos, at least the eating, there are some exceptions, but one of the exceptions is if a person has a terrible dream, and normally a dream, 99.9% of the time, and I just made that number up, but sounds right. A dream is just whatever people are thinking about. But if a person feels that it's a sign from heaven, it's a message from heaven, which is probably more for people, the more spiritually attuned generations in the past, then if it was a nightmare, he feels it's a bad, it's like a message, like a mini prophecy. This is what's going to happen if you don't fix yourself up. Then a person can fast as part of the tshuva, even on Shabbos. They have to do another fast afterwards to make up for fasting on Shabbos, but they're allowed to fast even on Shabbos. Why? Because if they postpone the fast, they might be worried the whole Shabbos about, what might happen. So this idea of sometimes allowing, obviously only when Torah says we can't apply it to everything, but we have this concept that if it's Shabbos going to be ruined, so something, we can do something else about it. So in this case, the person's going to get this letter. He doesn't know what it's about. He's going to be panicking the whole time. He's allowed to read it. However, if he knows it's just, literally like buying and selling, but he knows it's his electricity bill, then also a fill, you can't even look at it on Shabbos. I prefer not to look on my electricity bill ever, but sometimes what can you do? The gamma surah batilta mishum muksa, and also you can't even move this letter because it's muksa. And it's things that you're not allowed to read on Shabbos, so that doesn't have a purpose on Shabbos, and therefore, as we've learned in the past, anything that does not have a purpose on Shabbos becomes muksa, and we can't move it. Okay. Any questions on number 10? No? All right. Number 11, Yud Aleph. Kaisel oy tavlo sheyesh boy eizet suros oy diaknois. You have a wall that there's drawings or portraits because of tachtayim, and it's there's a caption. There's like a little thing underneath them. Zul Soros Ploini. This is a portrait of so and so, the Archduke of what do you call it? Who lived, and it's got a little biography over there. It said Jürgen Ploini. Well, this is the statue or something, whatever it happens to be.
Are you talking about graffiti?
No, we're talking about, like in the museum.
Oh, okay.
Not that you're going to be in the museum on Shabbos, but something like that. So you might go to, I don't know. Some people have little museums in the house. So you go there and there's got this, those people have, a portrait of all their ancestors on the wall. And there's a little biography about each one. So also likrois k'sav Shabbos. You can't read this on Shabbos because again, this doesn't enhance the Shabbos. It's not in the spirit of Shabbos. But fill the ayin by likri, even just to sort of have a little small look without reading it particularly. Also you can't do. The Chaim Sifrei Milchamos, also books about war. They didn't have as many books available as we have today. This is using an example. What they did have, books about different wars, Sifrei Divrei Hayomim, Shemachi Umois, or the histories of the nations, of the kings, Ha'olam, the Chaim Melitzos, Shalom, Shal Sichas Chulin, or parables or anecdotes, various things. We're going Sefer Emmanuel, for example. There was this book, Sefer Emmanuel, was popular at the time. Mikol Shekain Divrei Cheshech. How much more so? Love stories, those novels. Also, the Shabbos. You can't read these books on Shabbos. And even though sitting and reading per se is not an issue on Shabbos, but none of these books are in the spirit of Shabbos.
Rabbi,
Yes.
when you say not the spirit of Shabbos, you mean it's not Torah related or religious related books?
Right. So those things for sure,
pictures.
Torah, Jewish related things are in the definitely enhanced Shabbos. Even if it's stories or biographies of tzaddikim, or Jewish people overcame, difficult, could be a history, even not a tzaddik, just different people had, Jewish history. It you can learn from that and become a better person. Possibly even certain self-help books might be okay, or but just general sort of novels or if it's non-fiction, but it's just the kids shouldn't be studying for their math exam, on Shabbos, even though they're only reading the textbook. This type of thing, it's not. We're not talking about objectionable literature. Certain things that should never have in your house will stop. It's perfectly fine to read, and that's why I gave an example like a history book or something. But that's not what Shabbos is for. Shabbos is about connecting spiritually and growing spiritually, and developing our relationship with Hashem. So these books, although they may be fine, they may be excellent books, but not for Shabbos. It's reading the newspaper. And look, again, it's important to point out, depends who you're talking to, right? So let's say, for example, there's someone who is just starting to keep Shabbos. They didn't have the privilege to be brought up in a home where Shabbos was very important, and they're starting as adults, let's say, as an example. So if they read the newspaper for 20 minutes, although it's not the best thing in the world, but if that's part of keeping themselves busy, not to do things that are certainly malach on Shabbos, then maybe that's not a bad stepping stone. But a stepping stone. Once you have people, though, once you have people who are, they're connected, they're tuned into Shabbos, and they tuned into the purpose of Shabbos, which is, developing spiritually and self-growth and being connected, developing a relationship with Hashem, then all these things, they're the things you should let fall by the wayside and focus on things that are actually going to enhance Shabbos spiritually. Yeah, Ben.
Yeah, I want to say, I hear people say, if the TV is on, you can watch it. If you didn't put it on, if it's on and running, you don't shut it, but you can watch the TV. But from this one, I see that you really can't.
That's right. It's definitely not in the spirit of Shabbos. Now, it depends what it is. I will mention to you, although I don't really recall, but a lot of people have told me that during the Yom Kippur War, people had the TVs on, the whole sukkahs.
And the worst thing is that
because of updates.
You said no books of war, but now you.
That's right. Well,
yeah,
because God forbid, and again, this is this concept, they're anxious, hearing, a Jewish life's safe.
It was a terrible war, yeah.
Yeah. So there is potentially a time and a place, but in general, that's right. I mean, even if someone is technically not breaking Shabbos, the TV was on the whole Shabbos, so they didn't technically break Shabbos. But, just sitting in front of the TV or Shabbos, this really is, that's not Shabbos. That's certainly not, I think there's probably zero, but definitely, if there is only a very small percentage of television content that I think is going to make you a better human being, a more holy and spiritual person. And
not the news.
Not even the news, because it's all about sensationalism and various things. And it might be a good idea not to have a television, even not on Shabbos. There's no television on, especially today, where something that that is worthwhile, and there are things made to watch that are more in the non-fiction areas that are worthwhile and good. Today you can stream it, you can it's various things, and a person doesn't really need a television with all this the abundant amount of rubbish that's on it, coming into the homes. Our home should be a sanctuary where we've filtered out all these things that go in the world around us. Not that we necessarily want to withdraw from society. We want to be active participants in society, but in society, with multimedia, everything. There's every time you go to a supermarket, there's culture, the music, everything is blaring at you. So it's nice to be able to come into the home and just have a more spiritual and softer environment. So yeah. Okay. So these novels, these various things, they're not for Shabbos. They're not in the spirit of Shabbos. Now he mentions there are certain things that even during the weekday you can't read because there's no translation of Moshe Leitzim. In modern Hebrew, a Leitzim is clowns, like with the makeup. But in biblical Hebrew, often they translate it as scoffers. It's not the right word. But in other words, many books we have today, and one of the things, problems with the television shows, various things that they indirectly make fun of things that are truly important, and they break down the norms and the morals of society. It's one of the things when people, today's society perhaps isn't as moral as it was, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And one of the factors is certain novels, certain things, it brought certain ideas into people's homes, and it didn't need to be. So even if these books are written in Hebrew, and I'm not sure there's a lot to be gained from reading Harry Potter in Hebrew. Might be good practice for your Hebrew, but and these love novels. There's another prohibition, because it strengthens one's Yetzer Hara, one's animalistic side. If we get too much into these novels, is not good for a person spiritually. I will oisem sifrei divrei yom mishyotzem in yoni musa v'yirah. But if you have a history book written from a Jewish perspective, and therefore it gives you some lessons to learn from the past, there's opportunities to learn from mistakes and or from the positive, and they're to grow. Could go in, say for Yusuf Yetzer Boy. So let's give an example, Josephus and the like. Even if they're written in a non-Jewish language, you're allowed to read them even on Shabbos. But you shouldn't spend too much time. You need a little downtime, need to relax a little bit. There are certainly people who can sit and study Torah the entire Shabbos, and there's no problem. Some people need a break. Some people need like a bit of mental break. They need to read something light or talk about something light. So we can look at these things. Just that shouldn't become the entire Shabbos either. All right. Any questions on that? Okay.
So you can't really look at your own family's pictures?
Pictures you could look at a small amount of time. In other words, again, that shouldn't become the entire Shabbos afternoon. But something like that, especially, let's say you're looking at wedding photos, the kids,
Yeah.
or different, whatever happens to be. This is making someone happy for good things. Puts them in the right mood. So you'll have to have a look, but it shouldn't spend the whole Shabbos doing it. Yes, David.
Yeah, I've read that medical texts are in the okay category.
So I think with that, it's going to depend. In other words, sometimes people need to read things for their own health. Either because there's a health problem, or to avoid a health problem, or staying healthy. So these type of things are okay. Again, a small amount of Shabbos shouldn't become the whole Shabbos activity. But if someone's studying their medical school, and now they've got an exam next week, and they're spending the whole Shabbos going through the textbooks, that's not really in the spirit of Shabbos. So that's I mentioned before. I mean, it wasn't really medical to say, but I mentioned to say like some self-help books. And you have to be careful with self-help books, because some people's idea of self-help is not really a Jew's idea of self-help. But whether that's physically, emotionally, medically, whatever it is, if it's going to somehow enhance you as a person, physically or spiritually, then that's fine in moderation.
I was talking about like a medical professional, a doctor, a nurse, a dentist, and he's reading his texts.
They should avoid it when it's their
business,
profession.
but just to care better for people or to know more information.
Yeah, they should. I'm not going to say it's forbidden, but the whole week, this is their profession. Shabbos should be their time to connect with Torah, But especially when it's profession. I'll give another example. Let's say there's a person that has a foreign money collection. So it's not legal tender where you live. You can't use it. It's just a hobby. So again, it's not for the whole Shabbos, but a person wanted to show his hobby to someone, so they're fine. But if this person is a dealer, he buys and sells these foreign coins and bills.
There is
then the
pictures on it from kings and things that you don't want to see. On the foreign money.
Yeah, it could be, but I was just using as a general example. I'm not every specific type of coin or
Okay.
I'm sure there are certain things that
Just show
generally
value.
speaking, I was just showing the difference between someone who he's looking at the coin collection as a hobby and someone who would say profession. Now it could be the exact same coins,
Right.
but for one person, it's their real weekday occupation, so it's not so appropriate. So the medical professional, you could say that studying a medical text is a mitzvah because it's gonna lead to saving or enhancing lives. So it's hard to say it's forbidden because helping people is a mitzvah. But when it's part of one's, let's say the ongoing research of staying in touch with the latest developments in your career, in your field, then it's like the dealer playing with his coin collection that he's going to sell next week. It's like a week. Can't say it's the same because selling a coin probably is going to enhance someone's life, but finding out about a new medicine could enhance someone's life. So definitely not spend too much time on Shabbos. Yeah. All right. Number 12. Also, limdoid b'Shabbos eizedava imhu l'tzorich. You can't measure anything on Shabbos if there's a need for it. Ela im kain hu l'tzorich mitzvah, unless it's a mitzvah. So on Shabbos, probably most of us don't need to measure things too often. But this would even apply, let's say on Yom Tov. Yom Tov, you're allowed to cook. So let's say someone's making a cake on Yom Tov. So when you put the ingredients, let's say you put in 2 cups of flour, you can't measure exactly 2 cups. You pour in the flour and it's roundabout. Then you throw it in. So we can't measure things exactly. Now, when we say unless it's for a mitzvah, and again, Yom Tov there's more examples. So we know, for example, a shofar has to be a certain length. And, this shofar is sort of borderline. But you have to know, can I do the mitzvah? Can I use this shofar to blow on Rosh Hashanah for the mitzvah? So you could measure it exactly to see, is it fitting for the mitzvah? Or a lulav has to have a certain minimum length, etc. So there will be times when for a mitzvah, you can measure something exactly, but anything else we can't. Yes, Bob.
Taking someone's temperature with the thermometer?
So we wouldn't do that unless it was a very serious. So if it's a life-threatening or, potentially, otherwise we probably wouldn't take someone's temperature on Shabbos. So we are going to have, I think it's the next chapter, or it's the one after, if not the next one. We're going to speak about, yes, it is the next chapter. We're going to speak about what you can do medically for someone in a non-emergency situation. Because, we sort of got, in that we've got a few categories. You've got sort of just maintaining good health. You've got someone who's, they've got a cold, they don't feel great, but there's really nothing, God willing, nothing too serious. Then you have a person who's bedridden. Then there's a person that's a possible, if it's not addressed, it becomes life-threatening, and then you have actual life-threatening. So we're going to discuss the various things, but unless we have a concern, we wouldn't measure temperature exactly. Okay. 13, Yud Gimel. The Mokim Seder, where there's a place where there's going to be a great loss. Mutar l'daber b'tzrachov, bein im Yisrael, bein im Goy. You can discuss your business. You can't make a business transaction, but you could discuss it on Shabbos. Now, great loss, I want to first give a definition of loss. Loss does not mean not earning. Right? In other words, if I do this deal, I get $10,000. If I don't do the deal, I don't actually lose 10,000. It's not like, because I never had it, so I'm not losing it. When we say a loss, we mean, I have a product worth $10,000, and if I don't do something right now, it's going to get ruined or disappear or dry up. And now the $10,000 is gone. Now, still, you can't do transactions on Shabbos, you can't sell it on Shabbos, but there may be a place, there'll be time and place we can discuss. Let's say, for an example, let's say a non-Jew came to purchase something from you. So you can't do any deals with him on Shabbos, but you can say to him, it's my Sabbath. I happy to sell it to you tonight. After Shabbos is over. He might want to ask a few questions. You'd answer a few questions, and we'll see you later, type of thing. And you can tell him you're first in line because you came first. Whatever it happens to be. In other words, you're not making an absolute commitment to selling it. You're not negotiating prices. You're not drawing up contracts. Should this be something? It could be something that only has limited buyers, or if it's not sold tonight, the price halves. Whatever it happens to be. So in a place where there could be a great loss, and has to be a significant loss, then you could do these things. Yehuda.
Yeah, I thought we're not allowed to on Shabbos to make plans for during the week.
Correct. So we can't do these things. It's not in the spirit of Shabbos, taking away from Shabbos. But here we're talking about a great loss. Let me give a better example. Let's say a person, the pipe broke in their basement, and things are getting ruined. Now, there's really not a lot you can do about it on Shabbos, but you could say to someone, arrange for them to come right after Shabbos, whatever it is. I mean, I'm just trying to things out. Again, it's probably the selling something is not such a good example because it's not you're not losing per se. But in a case where something is going to get ruined or lost, or the value is going to, a person's going to have a significant financial loss, he can discuss. He can't include, he can't sell, he can't buy, but you could have a short discussion.
Okay.
Okay. You dial number 14. Anything that a Jew can't do, you're not allowed to ask a non-Jew to do. Because telling a Jew to do something is rabbinic prohibition. So we've mentioned this a few times in the past, and it really sort of began in the Babylonian exile, but it was more and continued in sort of the Greek occupation of Israel pre-Hanukkah. This was the first time Jews lived with non-Jews in the same area. The Babylonian exile, not so much. It was sort of in different areas. But the Greek occupation, You lived in the same area. So much like we have today, where, you know, even if you have sort of a Jewish street, there can be non-Jews in the same street as well. They're not in ghettos, we're not in ghettos. So what happened was people would organize a non-Jew to follow them around and just do everything for them. Now, although they were technically not breaking Shabbos, it certainly destroys the spirit of Shabbos. So therefore, the sages of the time made a prohibition that we cannot ask a non-Jew to do something for us on Shabbos. Now, there are exceptions, and we discussed some in the past, and for the rest of this chapter, we're going to discuss when you can, when you can't. We won't get through it all today. So there are exceptions. So, but generally you can't. Now, what can't you ask them to do? Something that you can't do yourself. So let's give an example. Let's say I had some domestic help in my house on Shabbos. Now, you know, we discussed earlier, you can't pay them for those hours on Shabbos. You know, you have to organize that they work when it's not Shabbos and you pay them extra for that. That's a separate issue. But let's say I'm allowed to sweep the floor if it's the type of floors we have today. When we learned the dirt floors we can't sweep, but a regular floor like we have today, I'm allowed to sweep the floor, so I can ask them to sweep the floor. But I can't ask them to vacuum the floor because I can't vacuum on Shabbos. Side point to this, and we'll get to other examples later on, if I ask them to sweep the floor and they decide to vacuum, because for them, vacuuming is easier than sweeping, then you don't have, they're allowed to, you don't have to stop them because they're not vacuuming for you, they're vacuuming for themselves, make their life easier. You would be quite happy for them to sweep. The same, let's say I'm allowed to wash dishes, cold water, well, let's say preheat water, but I'm allowed to clean my dishes. I can ask the non-Jew to clean my dishes also. If they decide to put it in the dishwasher or use hot water to make the job easier, they're doing that for themselves, to make the job easier for them. They're not using the hot water or the dishwasher for you. You're quite happy if they do, you know, scrub it hard enough just to use cold water and wash your dishes. So you can use the dish at the next meal. Susan.
Okay, I'm really confused. You can, if the non-Jew wants to use the hot water, it's okay on Shabbos?
Right, so let me try, I'll try and make it a bit more clear. So you can ask a non-Jew to do anything that you can do.
Okay.
You can't ask them to do something you can't do.
Oh, okay.
So
Now
I'm
it's
allowed to wash my dishes in cold water, have the dishes available for the next meal. So I can ask them to wash the dishes. Now it's easier to wash dishes with hot water. So if they decide, not because you ask them, they decide for themselves to use hot water to make their job easier. So they're now using hot water on Shabbos for themselves, not for you.
Okay,
Right?
I understand now.
Yeah, you just want the floor swept. They decide to vacuum because it's easier for them. So you don't need to vacuum, you just need the floor clean. So the vacuuming, the sweeping you're allowed to do, so you can ask them to do. And if they then decide to vacuum, they're doing that for themselves to make their life easier. So they're, you know, non-Jew, not only don't have to keep Shabbos, they're not allowed to keep Shabbos. So if they decide to do something for themselves, perfectly fine. You know, there could sometimes be an issue of Morris Iron, right? And we spoke about Morris Iron before about it not looking right. You know, it'd be like if someone looking like me went into a non-kosher restaurant and bought a Coke. So people would see me walking in, it doesn't look right. So either a bystander might think, oh, I didn't know that restaurant was kosher, and they go in and get a burger instead of the Coke. Or they go by and look at those hypocrites. You know, they call themselves religious people and they're going to this trade place, and you could turn them off right? So that's Morasayim. So possibly, if you're in a, sometimes apartment buildings, you hear everything through the walls and everything, if people hear the vacuum going all day or various appliances, then the potential Morasayim issue. But in the concept itself, they do something that's a malacha because it makes it easier for them, there's no problem. Okay. Now, not only I'm not allowed to ask them to do something I can't do on Shabbos, but I can't even hint to them. Now, often people are taught you can hint to a non-Jew to do something. We'll see when you can. Again, without preempting too much, but some of the exceptions to this rule is for a sick person, for the needs of the community, various things. But we'll get to those. But generally speaking, I can't ask a non-Jew to do something I can't do. I can't even hint for them to do it. I can't even tell them before Shabbos to do it for me on Shabbos. I can't say to the guy on Friday afternoon, Friday morning, I'll say, before you leave tonight, turn off all the lights. Can't do that. Also, that's also not allowed. I also can't ask a non-Jew on Shabbos to do something after Shabbos. Now, this isn't because of the decree against asking a non-Jew on Shabbos. Given the malacha, this is Shas Heta, because he's going to do the work after Shabbos. So it's not this issue. Ella also, but it's the issue we discussed before of preparing on Shabbos for after Shabbos, of taking away the spirit of Shabbos. Therefore, for a mitzvah, you're allowed. So, again, extreme example. Obviously, life is not so black and white, but the black and white examples give us an idea of the concept. You could say, to the driver who picks up the Chavra Kedisha, who picks up the deceased, he drives the body to the funeral parlor. You can tell him to go pick it up after Shabbos. So, it doesn't have to be something so extreme. Even for another mitzvah, let's say another mitzvah, will be a good example. Say to someone, we need to deliver. Can you deliver this tzedakah after Shabbos, or whatever it is? So for a mitzvah,
you bring somebody food.
Yeah. So although it's something we can't do on Shabbos, but he's going to do it after Shabbos. So for a mitzvah, because again, one of the exceptions of asking a non-Jew to do something on Shabbos is going to be if it's for a mitzvah. We'll see under certain circumstances. Okay, test valve number 15. Now, let's say you didn't ask him, you didn't hint, nothing. He just goes and does it himself. He realizes you're sitting in the dark, so he decides to turn on the lights for you. You have to tell him no. Now, we'll discuss it later, but I'll just mention it now. If he's doing it for himself and for you, right? So let's give an example. Let's say, you're both sitting in an area and, it's 100 degrees and the air conditioner is going. And the fuse goes. And he decides to turn it on because he doesn't want to get hot. So although he's also doing it for you, because he knows you're sitting in the room too, but he's also doing it for himself. So therefore, is no problem. But if he just happens to walk by and sees that you know, you need the fuse switch flicked, and he's doing it only for you, not for himself, then you have to tell him no. Now, it could be the example I gave wasn't the best example, because if it's really over 100 degrees, then not having the air conditioning for an extended period of time could become a health issue. And health issues are one of the things that we're going to see as an exception. So let's lower the temperature a little bit to a point where it's a comfort issue, not like a dehydration, you know, heat stroke issue. Now, so you know, or the light went out, the light turned off. So if he's turning it back on because he also wants the light on himself, that's for both of you, it's not a problem. But if it's just for you, then you know, there's generally no danger of sitting in the dark. Now, obviously, I'm sure we can all think of a case where possibly it is, but overall majority of the time, it's just a comfort issue. So therefore, we're not going to be able to let him do it. Robert, yes.
Yeah, you know, maybe we need to revisit. We spoke about this sometime in the past, but I think we all grew up with the concept of the Shabbos goy. And so
Yes.
the question is, that's not really an appropriate thing to have relative to having somebody do. I mean, the whole concept was you would have a Shabbos, somebody who was not Jewish do something for you you couldn't do. But on the basis of what you're telling us, it's not really nice to essentially categorize somebody as a Shabbos Jew. And the same thing of selling, you know, I remember people would say, well, you know, for Shabbos, they would sell their, they'd have a non-Jewish partner and they'd sell them the restaurant or the store for $1. And therefore it could be open on Shabbos, but then it wouldn't be kosher, the restaurant, because it's open on Shabbos. But let's say, you know, a grocery store. I mean, that was the manipulation to get around the prohibition of being open on Shabbos or Yom Tov. So, you know.
You raised a few issues. So Shabbos guy, in your house, there's going to, where everyone is healthy, there's going to be severe limitations. So one of the areas you could have is, you know, say to light the fireplace or put in wood. You know, today, most of us have a different form of heating in our homes, so we can put it on before Shabbos, is no problem. But heat and cold are health issues or potential health issues. Again, if we're talking about a stream. So in some of the places where some of the people are, you know, where it gets very cold in the winter, and so you're allowed to ask, and we'll get to there. You're allowed to. So if the Shabbos guy, you know, he comes in each Shabbos morning and he puts wood in the fireplace, so then that's no problem because that's a health issue. But if it's just to just come in and do things for you, so then it's a problem. Now again, if it's for a mitzvah, so you need someone to light a candle so you can light Shabbos candles. Oh, you can't light Shabbos candles Shabbos. It's a Yom Tov candles, right? So then it's a mitzvah. If it's could even be if there's no lights, we're gonna have your Shabbos meal. Shabbos candles blew out, whatever it was a storm, you know. So there is a time and place. So what we're starting with the first chapters is with the first laws is just giving the general principle. And then we're going to start working through the exceptions. Now the issue you raised about the business, again, we'll get to more detail later, but it's not as simple as some people perhaps think. So let's say someone really did have a partner. I'm not talking about you just make a partner for Shabbos. You really had a partner, and you need to set it up something like, so let's say certain days of the week belong to him, and certain days of the week belong to you. And so we're not splitting all the profits 50-50. If Saturday is the best trading day, and he's got a day, he gets all those profits because that business belongs to him on Shabbos and not to you at all, as an example. If it really has to stay open. Now, there can still be a Morris Ayin issue that maybe, you know, everyone knows that this business is owned by a religious Jew. So it's going to make problems. So maybe a person has to sell his stake in the business or various things. Now, sometimes situation will cause that. One area where they are sort of lenient to bring in non-Jewish partner for Shabbos are hotels. Because, you know, majority of the clientele, what are they going to do? They're not going to check out. They're not going to check in. You know, so, I have a friend I grew up with. He has hotels, and you know, it doesn't own them outright. If you own them outright, you can't just bring, as you said, you can't sell it for $1 to the non-Jew for the day and you know, and get around it. But he has, you know, it's there's partners in the company that owns the hotels, and let me tell you, it's like well over 100 pages, the contract, to be able to make it very clear, you know, what's his stake in it, what's their stake in it. So he doesn't have any interest in the Shabbos and Yom Tov at all. It's all theirs. Okay, that's it's a good one. Again, it's a problem. There are many misconceptions. You know, another, just nothing to do with this, but there's a big misconception. You know, people think if a knife became non-kosher, you stab it in the ground a few times, and all of a sudden it's became kosher. Okay, so in the past, they didn't have stainless steel blades. They had like iron, you know, and if you stuck it into hard ground in and out quickly, it took a layer off. You know, they had like rocky ground, and yes, so it'd be like you know, some of these knife sharpeners you have today that they actually take a thin layer off the knife. So if it became non-kosher from cutting cold things, so not something that was hot, because the heat goes through the whole thickness of the blade. But let's say someone cut a non-kosher fish. So if anything, it's got something stuck to the outside layer. So if you would take off that layer, then there's no problem. But because it was used, or this method was used in a small amount of cases, small amount of situations, people then have the misconception you can buy a knife from anywhere, no matter how it was used or what it was used for, and we just stab it in the ground, which even in the cases where it would have worked, today's, you know, really good quality stainless steel knives, and even the cheap ones are good quality compared to what we used in the past. You know, it's not going to take the layer off. So, yeah.
And I remember in growing up, there was always this conversation of having see-through glass dishes versus glazed dishes relative to seepage within the glaze or space in the glaze. And so, again, it was the issue of having see-through glasses, total glasses that did not necessarily have any kind of a covering on it, a finish.
For dishes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, so possibly there are glass dishes that are glass, and then there's dishes that are like it's called the corral or something, you know. It's
that's ceramic, but that's still
ceramic,
some kind of a ceramic.
It's glass with ceramic. So glass, actual glass, it's not as porous as other things, and there are times where other materials would be made not kosher, that glass is still kosher. Again, beyond the scope of a short answer to go through all the circumstances, but there will be times where, at least after the fact, and also sometimes in the first instance, but at least after the fact, where actual glass does not become not kosher because it's not porous like metal and earthenware. Right. But when it's the glass, it's also got some type of ceramic in it, then it's considered an earthenware vessel, which becomes not kosher the easiest and quickest, and is the hardest to kosher. So possibly that's the issue. All right, so we Yes,
Just a final request, I'm sorry.
please.
I don't have my Shulchan Aruch with me here in Panama. I didn't bring it. And I've looked through Safaria, but they have a Weiss edition. If anybody knows of where I can access our edition of the Shulchan Aruch for me to be able to scroll through it, like I do with Safari, with Barachot, that's
You
what
talking about
I
the
need to.
Astro?
I didn't look at Asphalt, just looked through Safaria,
Yeah.
but if any,
No, but-
I'll look and see. Yeah,
But you want the Art Scroll edition? Is that what you're after?
yes, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
because
whatever
we-
we're studying, the one we're
Yeah.
studying, I guess, is Art Scroll, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Hebrew is going to be the same in any of them, but if you want Art Scroll particularly, you can.
I need the English, yeah.
You can buy it electronically from Art Scroll.
Oh, I see. Okay, Yehuda, did you have a suggestion? No, okay. All
Where
right,
are we exactly? We're doing the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch.
right. Yeah, right,
Which
Isaac.
Perek?
Yeah, but he wants that English translation with the
Right.
One that we're
That's
using,
what
which
they
is,
used to. Right.
which is,
So without-
it's the Art Scroll, right?
Yeah, so you can, I believe, you can't get everything Art Scroll electronically, but you can get a lot of it, and I believe this is one of the ones that you can.
All right, I'll look and see. If not, I'll communicate through Rabbi Smith. Okay, thank you, everybody.
Where are we?
Everybody-
Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, Sif what?
Now,
Yeah,
we're doing Simon Sadik, chapter 90.
90s.
Yeah.
But they have it in Safaria.
Yeah, but he's
Okay,
after
well, maybe-
the English that he's used to.
And
Anyway,
Well, I'll
everyone
look at-
have a wonderful week.
I'll look and see. Thank you, Ezra.
Wonderful Shabbos.
Okay, good. Okay,
Take care.
bye-bye,
have a great
everyone.
Shabbos. Thank you, Rebbe.
Chabad.org
Thank-
also has
Thank you,
a
Rabbi.
English
Stay safe,
translation.
everybody.
Yeah,
It's not as good as Art Scroll, because Art Scroll is a commentary, but it's just a translation. The actual translation is not bad. Chabad.org has Kitzur Shulchan Aruch also.
okay, great.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Rabbi.
everybody. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye.